Hi guys, how's everyone doing? This is basically NoPhaseNoKill. I've just been asked to do a video for a lion guide, so pretty much what I'm going to do is just run through sort of my experience as a lion player. Just give you guys a bit of background. I'm a support player. I've been playing Dota for quite a long time now, and pretty much solely play supports. So at the moment I'm currently sitting just above 5.2k. And I've played about 140 games in solo ranked with Lion. So this is sort of my spiel on the hero, where I think that his strengths and weaknesses are. I think that he's probably my favourite support hero in terms of how much impact that you can have in a game. So yeah, I hope that you guys enjoy this. Just to give you a little bit of an idea as well, in terms of, like I was saying before, it's about 150 games, just over that. So yeah, I'll just run through some specifics into what I think makes the hero really, really strong. So basically, I'd like to firstly run through his skill set. Now, I think that this is a really important part of what a lot of players miss. They don't actually really sort of take into account exactly how the skills of a hero scale, and just for some reason go off a sort of preconceived or idea about how that hero should be built in terms of skill wise. So we'll just run through some pretty much how all of his skills scale, and from there we can then talk about some ideas that I've had recently, and some ideas, I guess, around why people skill Lion a certain way. So starting off with his Impale, you've got the cast time is 0.3 seconds. Now note that the cast time is slightly different from the cast backswing as well. So it's just Impale basically just has a cast time or cast point of 0.3 seconds. The damage goes from level 180 to 140 to 200 to 260. His stun goes from pretty much 1 second to 1.5, 2 to 2.5, so scales half a second each time. Now, this is a really interesting thing which I'd like to mention, that I find that a lot of players, particularly sort of mid sort of 3k and even 4k and even 5k players, don't really quite understand the max range of his actual Impale. So the cast range is 500. The actual travel distance of the spikes is 820. So this is really important, particularly with such a squishy support where you can pretty much just sit at the back of a fight and hit someone from 825 distance away. However, you've also got another additional 125 on top of that, because the radius of the spike is 125, which means that it adds up to a total of 950. So in an ideal world, if you have a hero that's stunned, you can actually hit them with Impale from 950 units away, which is quite a long way, considering his ultimate's actually got a 900 range. So I think that that's pretty impressive in terms of it's actually longer than that. So the ultimate range is pretty big as well. Interesting things to note as well with Impale is that it can hit invis units, for all of you guys out there who are just starting. And one really important thing to note also is that it's not just unit castable like Hex is, it's actually ground castable. So with that max range, with the cast range of 500, if you were casting it on a hero, you're sort of limiting the range in terms of that, because you don't have as much control over it. Whereas if you're cast ranging it over a cliff or something like that, you can actually hit someone from 950 units away. So this is sort of quite useful in terms of a lot of juking scenarios, and also in terms of team fights excuse me, come into the mid and late game. So you're often not actually wanting to be targeting it specifically on a hero, because heroes, as a general rule of thumb, aren't going to be grouped up all the time. So you're wanting to get a really, really good angle on the Impale, which often will result in clipping it on either side of that radius that I just talked about with the 125 radius. So you'll be aiming it down the middle of sort of 3 different heroes or 2 different heroes, so you can clip them on either side, the left and the right hand side of that Impale, which is really important because it's pretty much a Ravage late game if you can hit 3 heroes, which is pretty awesome. Second move, Hex. Just also to note, I haven't included the mana costs for these because they pretty much scale relatively even. I don't really feel that the mana costs for his spells really have an impact in terms of the skill build that you choose to go. So Hex, this time it's an actual backswing cast, so it doesn't have a cast point, but it's got a backswing, so that's when he pretty much uses his wand thing and sort of swings it backwards and then casts the Hex. So that's got just over 0.5 of a second. Starts off at 2.5, then goes to 3, then goes to 2.5, and then goes to 4. It also instantly destroys illusions, and can also be purged off by diffusal blades and stuff like that as well. So looking at that spell instantly, always getting 1 level in Hex is an absolute paramount. It's pretty much the biggest value point in terms of Lion as an all-round hero, obviously apart from his ulti. But yeah, it's just an amazing spell, Hex. We'll run through a little bit later on, once we've gone through this as well, the different variations and some stuff that I've been trying. Mana Drain. The cast time of this is 0.3 seconds. The full duration of the channel time is 5 seconds. However, if the unit then runs out of mana, they actually it stops it. It also channels in intervals of 0.1 of a second. So, for instance, if you've got it at level 1 and it's doing it does 20, you're getting 2 mana. Mana in intervals of 2, basically. This is sort of an interesting scaling in terms of it goes from 20 to 40, so it doubles on the first level. Then you get a 50% increase from 40 to 60, but then you get double again to 120. So I guess really, yeah, that will have some interesting things to talk about. It also instantly destroys illusions like Hex. So I think one thing that's really underutilized by a lot of Lion players is they don't really abuse this fact, particularly against heroes that get Manta, heroes such as PL, sort of heavily illusion-based heroes. A lot of people don't really abuse the fact where they're casting Mana Drain to get rid of these illusions in the middle of a fight. So this can be really important because you can underestimate how much illusion, or one illusion actually does during the middle of a fight, because often it's if you say have limited AoE damage, that often gets ignored and the damage can add up quite quickly. So it's really casting your Mana Drain, the 0.3 seconds, so once the first interval ticks on that is when the illusion will then die. So take into consideration that you've got the cast time of 0.3 seconds, but then you've also got to wait for that full first interval to go through, and then it removes the illusion. So it's a total of 0.4 seconds before you can actually get rid of that. Going to his ultimate, Finger of Death, the cast time is 0.3 seconds and the cast backswing is 0.5. This basically means that the full duration of his cast time is 0.8 seconds, so this is really important when factoring in heroes that have blink off cooldown, or heroes that can go invis and stuff like that, because you're wanting to judge if if it casts, are they able to dodge that? So Finger of Death is a dodgeable spell. So if you cast it and midair someone blinks, that will actually miss the hero. Or if a Clinks, for instance, has his invis off cooldown in a couple of seconds, and you cast it, and then the fade time fully activates by the time Finger of Death hits him, that will miss it. So that will miss him, sorry. One really interesting thing to note as well is that with the AGS upgrade, if the units are in a 2, if the unit that you cast it on is next to someone who's within 200 units, whether they're in fog of war or whether they're invisible, this will also hit them. So that's a really, really interesting thing to note as well. So, having gone through these skill builds, I really think that there's a couple of sort of core builds that you can go, and then a couple of ones which are sort of very experimental and really depend on the game that you've got. So, you're always wanting to max Impale. That's basically a given. Looking at that though, it really heavily depends on your lane whether you need to go Hex or Impale first. So the main variation that I choose to make and sort of decide on, this is just sort of a rule of thumb, is that if you're in a dual lane, you almost always want to go for Impale. But if you're in a tri lane, you almost always want to get Hex. Now, the separation between these two is that you're using Impale as more of a damage and harass tool, whereas early on you're using Hex as a killing tool. Really, you're wanting to disable them with that 2.5 seconds at level 1 to just instantly, or not instantly, but kill them over that time. Excuse me, and also chain disable the hero so that they can't get away. This obviously then transitions later on into the game where you're more using Impale as a disabler or a couple of hero disabler, and Hex is more used to completely lock down a target or just stop them from getting spells off and actually killing them. So I guess the transition of these two spells has actually switched around come to the mid and late game. So Impale's used more for killing people earlier on, and then used more for disabling later on in the game, whereas Hex is used for killing early on, but then really just using